Is there oil and gas in Kenya, or rather does Kenya have oil and gas? This is one of the most common questions that I get when we are discussing about the availability of oil and gas resources in Kenya. And in this video, I'm going to provide you an answer to that question and also give you the context when it comes to the oil and gas resources in Kenya. To answer your question or to give you a straight answer to that question, yes, Kenya has oil and gas. In fact, Kenya has significant oil and gas resources, with the first commercial oil discovery having been made in 2012 by Tullow Oil in Lokisha in Turkana. But for you to be able to get context of that oil discovery, you need to understand that oil and gas exploration in Kenya has been taking place since 1950s. In fact, the first oil well in Kenya was drilled in 1956 by BP Shell Development Company within the Lamu oil and gas basin. But I also know that you may have a lot of questions because since oil was discovered in Turkana, there seems to be very little going on. And that has raised a lot of questions. Some people fear that probably that was just, a way for some of the leaders to make money. There are some people who feel that probably there was no oil in Kenya after all. But the truth of the matter is this: Kenya has oil and gas resources. Yes, Tullow discovered oil in Turkana, which is estimated at the moment to be about 750 million of recoverable oil and gas resources. And while activities when it comes to what has been going on in Turkana have slowed down, it is important for you to actually understand that the oil and gas exploration process takes several stages. What you might have seen to be a lot of activities were the initial stages of oil and gas well drilling, extended well testing, and probably the early oil pilot scheme where Kenya exported its first crude oil. Now, those activities would actually all be considered to be the first stage and probably the second stage. There's still a lot of other things that need to be done for the oil in Turkana to actually get to a stage where production begins. For example, Tullow has still not gotten the approval of their field development plan. And I know that document is being discussed within the government circles, trying to ensure that the plan is in place, it is aligned before they get approval, so that then the investors can get to a stage where they make the decision to actually invest their money to develop the resources. So the current inactivities in Turkana, and probably you are not seeing a lot of things going on, is still within the space of that project taking place. And I know probably that answer is not an answer that would satisfy you, but at least you know that it will take a while before you start seeing full production and also construction of the crude oil pipeline from Turkana to Lamu, and finally getting to see Kenya exporting its crude oil. And that's a good segue to try to answer a question that probably I know you might actually raise with me right now, as to why Kenya is not building its own refinery. If I was to take you back a while, Kenya actually used to have a refinery in Changamwe, and that refinery was converted into a storage facility which is under the management of Kenya Pipeline Company. And the reason for that is because if you look at some of the plans that were there to kind of revive and make it a bit better, it was very costly to even turn that refinery into an operational facility. And so it was easier, or it made more economic sense to actually turn it into a storage facility than actually trying to invest probably $3-4 billion to try to make it modern or to modernize it. And that argument still carries the day when it comes to building of an oil refinery in Kenya. And this is a conversation that has been going on for a while, with many people asking, why is Kenya exporting its crude oil instead of actually building a refinery? Building a refinery in Kenya is a project that is going to consume several billions of dollars, And at the moment, and given the amount or the volume of crude oil in Turkana, it really does not make a lot of sense to actually build a local refinery in Kenya. However, this is a conversation that we should continue having, probably as more oil and gas resources are discovered in Kenya, because that is going to increase the daily output of crude oil production in Kenya. And to give you some context, Uganda, which is Kenya's neighbor, is building a 60,000 barrels per day refinery to serve its domestic and regional needs. And what that means is that if that refinery is finally constructed, and there are every indication to show that it's going to be constructed, that will also change the economic dynamics when it comes to building another refinery within the region. And that will make building a local refinery in Kenya a little bit more uneconomic. And this is because, after all, we can actually easily import petroleum products from Uganda instead of getting them from Middle East or Asia as we do currently. One of the ideas that has been floated aloud is the construction of a modular refinery in Kenya and probably in Turkana. And I think this is an idea that makes a lot of sense when you consider the energy security in Kenya. Over the long term, Kenya should not rely on importation of petroleum products, especially if it becomes an oil and gas producing nation. So if you have been wondering whether there is oil and gas in Kenya, the simple and straight answer to you is yes, there is oil and gas in Kenya. But the upstream oil and gas industry in Kenya is still at its infancy, still very young, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done to turn that dream of turning Kenya into an oil producing nation to come true. When it comes to the oil and gas industry in Kenya, and especially looking for the oil and gas resources, there is need for government to continue putting in place measures to attract more investment into that industry. This is because you need capital to actually develop your oil and gas industry, specifically the upstream sector. And if we can have a proper regulatory framework, a predictable fiscal policy where taxes can be predictable, then it is possible to turn Kenya into a favorable investment destination when it comes to the upstream oil and gas industry. You need more investors taking up blocks in Kenya and investing their own money to explore and probably look for more oil and gas. And this is because there is potential for more oil and gas discoveries, and that would increase the output or the potential for Kenya to produce more oil and gas each and every day. And what this means is that there is need to have a stable regulatory and fiscal policy, those that can be predictable, because investors do not like a hawkish approach when it comes to regulatory and fiscal issues. In the short term, Kenya also needs to develop the framework to develop the infrastructure that can actually help the country tap the natural gas. And this is especially true because Kenya does not consume natural gas or LNG. And given the discoveries that we have seen in Tanzania and also offshore Mozambique, there is also potential that Kenya is also going to discover gas offshore. And we need to be ready when that happens. In terms of management of oil and gas resources in Kenya, there is need for increased local capacity. And here I mean local content, but beyond that, there is also need for creation of a framework to manage oil and gas revenues when they come. A while back, I had suggested, and I think there is a bill that has been in Parliament for a very long time that deals with the Sovereign Wealth Fund. There is need for a very clear plan of how Kenya is going to manage its own oil revenues, especially when you consider there needs to be a great deal of transparency when it comes to the management of oil and gas resources in Kenya. So yes, Kenya has oil and gas, and I am inviting you to be part of this conversation and to also look at the opportunities that are emerging when it comes to the upstream oil and gas industry in Kenya. Find out how you can get involved, whether that is becoming a professional or getting an opportunity when it comes to jobs in the oil and gas industry, or even becoming an entrepreneur or looking at the business opportunities in the oil and gas industry in Kenya. If you have enjoyed this particular video, I am sure you are going to enjoy the video on your screen right now. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not, and I will see you in the next video.